Okay, so Cliff Kingsbury just got fired by the Cardinals, rightfully so. Cliff Kingsbury has been a disappointment throughout the entire Cardinals organization and throughout the NFL. I thought he should have been fired after his abysmal performance against the Super Bowl winning Rams, but you could say, listen, it was against the Super Bowl winners. It's okay to not look that unprepared and that, I guess, just terrible. I can't think of a better adjective than just terrible. And the problem with the Cardinals and what concerned me the most about Cliff Kingsbury tenure was the fact that this team didn't show progress. It was the exact same story you got year in and year out, but the difference this year was Kyler being injured, and so instead of even starting off hot, like this was the story of the Cardinals over the past 4 years. An entire saga of the Cardinals organization was you started off the year fantastic. September and October was this electrifying offense. The defense seemed improved from the year prior, and you show this life, this willingness to be able to be this electric spread offense, this thing that defenses didn't know what to do. You had all this motion and 4 or 5 wide receivers at a time. You kept drafting wide receivers. You kept drafting these skill positions as speed. It was all speed everywhere. And then you had this bruising James Conner come in, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a little different. You had DeAndre Hopkins, so now you have this weapon on the outside. You bring in Rondale Moore from Purdue, this speedster. Andy Isabella, another speedster. You bring in A.J. Green just to bring in, I guess, a veteran presence to go up and get the ball. And you're sitting here, and you're watching them play so good in this early parts of their season, and then it goes off the rails. They look, what was it? I believe they were 8-0 or 9-0, off the rails. Looks terrible in the playoffs. This is one of the most undisciplined teams I've ever seen. And I believe now they have the 3rd or 4th overall pick in this upcoming NFL draft, rightfully so. This team is not good. You have some really good skill position players. Budda Baker, who is slightly overrated, but still a solid secondary player who is stuck in a world where Byron Murphy is, like, I guess, your best cornerback, and he's not that great of a cornerback. He is just stuck on an island. You have no pass rush. After losing J.J. Watt to retirement, who still was a shell of himself, you lose Chandler Jones last offseason, who was an aging star, but he was still a fantastic player on the Cardinals. He's gone. So you have no pass rush right now. Isaiah Simmons has been a bust. I believe I'll put a graphic on the screen of what their first round picks and like what their draft picks have been over the past couple of years. It reminds me of what the Seattle Seahawks were doing a couple of years ago when they were just wasting draft capital. Now, to be fair, the Seahawks have proven me wrong, and you guys are getting a whole video on that. I'm basically going through the entire NFC West, making videos about them right now, I guess, starting with the Cardinals and now the Seahawks, and potentially we'll even talk about Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers, and hell, I'll even make a Rams video. But the Cardinals have wasted draft capital. They have now signed Kyler to a massive contract. And now there's even concerns that Kyler doesn't even really have football as his number 1 overall priority. I'm sure if you ask him, yes, football is his number 1 thing that he loves to do. But in reality, there's been so much noise around this team. You have Kyler playing assistant coach, doing play calling. You have Kyler having to defend himself about video games. You have COD memes now about him. This entire organization is so dysfunctional from the top down. You have asked your general manager to step down into a smaller role or to be fired. What is the goal and direction of this team? Genuinely, I don't understand what the Cardinals want to do moving forward. Because when you look at the outlook of this team, it's not a great cap situation. You are now put in a position where I think trading down to get as much value out of that pick is probably your best option, because if you go and pick a defensive lineman, it's not going to really move the needle because of how terrible and aging this offensive line is. Rodney Hudson is probably your best offensive lineman, and he's been hurt, and I could be wrong. He could have retired for all I know, because I could not name a single player on this offensive line because of how terrible it is. You've ran Colt McCoy into the ground. Kyler Murray has now officially gotten his first major injury, and he's already at a shortened height, and you have injured a part of his game that is so critical to the success of a shorter quarterback. Unless you are Drew Brees, who is becoming more and more of the biggest anomaly in NFL history, it seems, for a player at his height, at his athleticism, to be as dominant and as accurate as he is. You have now seen Russell Wilson, who has lost a little bit of his athleticism. Now, I give Russ one more year to prove me wrong that he's not washed, because at his height and his athleticism declining as much as it has been, you could see how terrible he was this year. His QBR was worse than Zach Wilson for a portion of this year. You look at Kyler. You have to use his athleticism to get outside of the pocket, be able to make plays. A torn ACL is not going to help. I understand torn ACLs have grown to be more manageable, I would say, and an easier thing to heal from than I'd say probably a decade ago because of modern medicine, which is a blessing. And shout out to modern medicine for becoming so innovative and so huge for these athletes to be able to bounce back from these major injuries and still become a superstar. We look at guys like Kevin Durant be able to recover from a torn Achilles, and be just as good, if not a better NBA player after the injury. That's remarkable. But the problem with the Cardinals is you have now paid this massive contract to a quarterback who is already undersized, who just had a major injury under a terrible offensive line. You now have DeAndre Hopkins, who is aging and getting more injury prone, I would say. Not to mention he lost 6 games this year to a PED allegation, what was it, substance abuse, something like that. So really, I don't have an answer, and I'm more just asking a question. This is the point of the entire video. We'll talk about it as we get closer into the offseason, because I think the Cardinals could easily become a bottom feeder team really quickly. What is the goal of this organization? What's next? What is the plan for this team? Because right now, obviously, you just fired your head coach. There is no plan. You don't know what's next for this team. And I'm here to ask you, the viewer, what would you do? John Quinones, what would you do in this situation? What would you do to fix this, to become a better team? Because right now, the Seattle Seahawks, a team that was expected to be in your position, in your division, is now in a spot of the playoffs. I understand it's the 7th seed, but they actually made the playoffs this year. With Geno Smith at quarterback, with all the hate that they got in this offseason for making the moves that they did, with losing some of their franchise guys. And in all honesty, I wouldn't trade Kyler this year. I would obviously bring in a guy that could elevate this team. Like, do you bring in a defensive head coach? Who do you bring in to better elevate this team at the coaching position? Because you're going to have to see who gets fired. And in all honesty, with what this franchise has done in previous years, I wouldn't be surprised with like a Frank Reich coming in. And then what's next? I think this team at best could become a mid-tier team, but you want to be a contender here. The NFC is not a strong conference. So what is there to do to become a contender in this conference? Let me know down in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Come join the journey. Come join this community I want to build. And subscribe down below. Leave a like. Leave a comment. Just show love here. And thank you so much for watching. And have a wonderful day.